Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo just gave an interview to CNN about the strike that killed Quds General Soleimani in Baghdad last night. And Pompeo saying, among other things,
this is a man who inflicted enormous harm not only on American lives, but created terribly destructive activities supporting Lebanese Hezbollah, Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, all of the bad actors in the Middle East. Qasem Soleimani was at the center of all of it.
Bill Roggio from Foundation for the Defense of Democracies attaching some detail to what Pompeo just referenced, saying it's more than a decade too late. In point of fact, the Bush and Obama administrations knew Soleimani, knew what he was up to, and the terrorist organizations that he was directing, as Pompeo just referenced, responsible for the deaths of at least 600 U.S. soldiers, tens of thousands of Iraqi soldiers, police, and civilians, says Bill Roggio from the Foundation of Defense of Democracy.
And Mike Pompeo says people are celebrating in Iran.
We've watched these protests over the last weeks. They weren't burning American flags. They were demanding that Iraqi political leadership stop their kleptocracy, stop their political shenanigans. And Qasem Soleimani was at the center of that. He was driving bad outcomes for the Iraqi people. He was causing many Muslims in the region to be killed. I saw last night there was dancing in the streets in parts of Iraq. We have every expectation that people not only in Iraq but in Iran will view the American action last night as giving them freedom to have the opportunity for success and prosperity for their nations. And while the political leadership may not want that, the people in these nations will demand it.
And this morning, Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khomeini, calling for 3 days of public mourning and then retaliation.
Catherine Herridge, formerly of Fox, now at CBS, she tweeted out last night, Scoop, senior U.S. government official, confirms to CBS the strike was in response to active threat to U.S. interests in the region personally overseen by Soleimani. Official made clear U.S. prepared to take further action if diplomats, soldiers threatened by his replacement. So just to be clear, with the left doing their pro forma call for congressional authorization or information, Iran attacked U.S. soldiers, killed an American contractor. U.S. troops are legally there. They're there at the pleasure of the Iraqi government, legally there, and they have a right to retaliate, even preemptively, to quell the threat. That's what they did. Congressional authorization not needed in this case. And I'll tell you what, something else here, too, for as much criticism as Trump gets with respect to his perhaps knowledge of American history, he's learned a couple of lessons of recent American history. He learned the lesson of Benghazi, and he learned the lesson of the hostage crisis in 1979 and Jimmy Carter's fecklessness during that crisis. And both were avoided. For more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Bret Baier, Fox News anchor, of course, special report, 5 p.m. weekdays, Chicago time, and his just released book, 3 Days at the Brink, FDR's Daring Gamble to Win World War II, his latest 3-day series. Bret Baier, thanks so much for joining us. Happy New Year. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Happy New Year.
Morning. So for as much as criticism as Trump gets from the left, also as being sort of seat of his pants, no coherence, no consistency. This has been a pretty consistent and measured approach he's taken to Iran, both Secretary of Defense Esper and Mike Pompeo, describing the last 2 months that has brought us to last night.
Yeah, I mean, you saw Esper and Pompeo in recent days continue the warnings that President Trump had delivered, which was if American service people or American interests are attacked, the response will be swift. Esper said on our air the other day, the game has changed, in part because what you mentioned there, and we've confirmed it as well through U.S. intelligence and through diplomats in the region, that there was an imminent attack. There was something big, according to one diplomat, that was being planned by Soleimani and the Iran-backed Shia militia in Iraq. And whether it was on the U.S. embassy or other interests in the region, it was in the works. And that is what led to this action, we are told. Now, Democrats will say that killing Soleimani makes him far more dangerous as a martyr for Iranians than it would be if he were alive, and that they will continue to say that the president is kind of haphazard and not strategic in the big picture. Republicans will say that the president laid down a marker and stood by it, as opposed to President Obama, who drew a line in the sand and didn't. And they will say that this sends a message that you can't screw with America, and if you do, the retaliation will be swift. Now, Iran will punch back. We just don't know when and how.
But President George W. Bush, Barack Obama, both, refused to kill General Soleimani, fearing it would lead to war. Do you think that's going to happen now in this case?
Well, I don't know if it's going to lead to war. I think there has to be some thinking, like, wait, these guys are serious inside Tehran. And remember that you're talking, I spent a lot of time in Iraq back in my days covering the Pentagon and the White House. I was there when Soleimani was funneling in these massive roadside bombs and IEDs to the Shia militia that were killing Americans and maiming Americans by the thousands. He was active not only in Iraq, but Syria, Lebanon, and even Afghanistan. Soleimani was like a big mastermind and considered in the big picture strategically a bigger get than al-Baghdadi. And some people are saying a bigger get than Osama bin Laden because of the impact on the region.
Well, again, the State Department reporting, and this is your colleague Lucas Tomlinson at Fox News reporting what the State Department put out. 17% of U.S. troops killed in Iraq from 2003 to 2011, orchestrated by Iran. They credit, in a macabre way, obviously, to Soleimani. So, to your point about how big a figure he was, and the position too of, if you take on or take out anybody, any terrorist leader, which is what he effectively is, working for the largest state sponsor of terror in the world, then you're creating martyrs. This is the Obama appeasement line. So we shouldn't go after al-Baghdadi, we shouldn't go after bin Laden, we shouldn't go after Soleimani because you create martyrs. Well, you want to take out principals and architects of terrorist activities. This is not controversial. I think the Democrats are really in a difficult position in terms of the argument they're offering.
Yeah, listen, the president has been clear that he doesn't want war and that he's trying to de-escalate, but power is decisive. In the Middle East, weakness is prolific, and that's how it works. If you get punched, you have to punch back. Otherwise, you look weak in the eyes of the world. Now, there were some people criticizing the president that he didn't act earlier when the drones were attacking the ships, when other things, transpired, that he didn't do something. This time he did, and he's getting criticism for it. I'll just say this, that, we're going to see some kind of response. And I think that these things are true. One, Soleimani had a lot of American blood on his hands. Two, Iran is going to do something. We don't know what or how. And three, this moment has changed completely the 2020 election, and expect it to be much more a focus on national security and foreign policy, even in the Democratic primary as early as this debate in 2 weeks.
Well, the other thing here, though, too, there's been some suggestion this is in part is Iran trying to feel out the Trump administration's resolve as it pertains to Iraq, not wanting Iraq to become a proxy state of Iran, and the concern by the administration that Iran obviously already exercises way too much influence in Iraq. But there's also this other matter, the matter of the devastation that the sanctions that were reinstituted over the last 2 years have wrought on the Iranian economy, which is fomenting a revolt on the streets of Tehran.
Yeah, listen, the sanctions are working in the eyes of putting the boot to the neck of Iran. They are feeling it, and which is in part the message that the president was sending out on Twitter, I think, this morning, which was Iran never won a war, but they always won a negotiation. And the message from the Secretary of State is de-escalation and talking. They believe that Iran could get to a place where they acknowledge that talking about the big picture and taking sanctions off and relieving sanctions is possible. I think there's going to be some retaliation. First, Senator Graham this morning saying, if you're an Iranian at an oil refinery and Iran strikes the U.S. again, I would get another job.
So, I read that tweet too. I mean, so we know that revenge is coming. It could be cyber attack, terrorism, but what does this mean for Israel? I know Benjamin Netanyahu cut his Greek island vacation short, is on his way back to Israel. They should be on alert as well, correct?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, I think you're going to see a lot of stiffening of defenses for the Israelis and for Americans. 750 U.S. Marines now deployed to the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. You have anti-missile batteries active and deployed in Bahrain for the Navy's Fifth Fleet. There is a lot of hardening of targets to try to defend about what they think is coming. But for Netanyahu, I mean, this does, fit into what he's been talking about for quite some time, about Iran's activity in the region. And he's standing by Trump, obviously, 100% in public comments and behind the scenes.
A quick electoral question for you. Is it possible to be a softer frontrunner than Joe Biden? Down in the polls, in third place in the polls in the first two states, Iowa and New Hampshire, and raising in the fourth quarter about half as much money as Bernie Sanders did.
No, I mean, I don't think you can officially call him a front runner. I mean, I know what the national polls say, but as far as his impact and what's happening in Iowa and New Hampshire, he's a front runner in South Carolina. I will say that. But nationally, yes, the polls are up, but he's got some vulnerabilities. And actually, this foreign policy issue does not really fit into his bailiwick. Remember, the Obama administration paid pallets and pallets of cash to the Iranians. It's believed that, they were negotiating with, among others, Soleimani. He doesn't have a lot of talking points here, and it was Bob Gates, the former defense secretary, who said that Biden was on the wrong side of every major foreign policy issue that he was a part of. That's Bob Gates. So he'll say that he has a ton of experience in this area, but I'll be interested to see how it plays in a Democratic primary, which is anxious to go the other way, which is, step out of the region and pull back.
Yeah, as Oscar Wilde said, experience is the name we give our mistakes. That's Joe Biden. Bret Baier, Fox News anchor, 5 p.m. Chicago Times special report, weekdays, author of the just-released book, 3 Days at the Brink, FDR's Daring
Which took place in Tehran.
What's that?
Oh.
It took place in Tehran, the meeting between FDR, Churchill, and Stalin.
Yes, it did. All right, 3 days. It could be more timely. 3 Days at the Brink, FDR's Daring Gamble to Win World War II. You want to pick up that book for a post-Christmas stocking stuffer. Bret, thanks so much for joining us, as always. Appreciate it.
We'll see you guys.
Thanks. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Balance of nature. Changing the world, one life at a time.
I was having a hard time breathing. It was hard for me to put one foot in front of the other. It was just awful. I feel 100% better. I mean, I can breathe. I don't feel that weight on my chest anymore. My head feels clearer, and my